Hello folks, welcome to one of the continuing events we have here at Harvard Law School. I want to introduce my colleague and dear friend, David Harris, who we were very happy to recruit from Fair Housing here in Boston, and he's been very much involved in all that we do. He's trying to sit down and pretend like he's asleep.
I'm not pretending.
Oh, he is asleep. But it's great to see him here, and I have to say that we're very happy also to have you both seeing a movie. It's a short piece, and I'm going to introduce the film. The person who could hear us right now is Lacey Schwartz. She's a graduate of Harvard Law School, a mentee of mine, and a professor Guinea's as well. And I have a little disappointment, but I can't have an over disappointment. I asked her what she's going to do next, thinking that she's going to say, I'm going to have the biggest case. She said, no, more films, more films, more films. And she's outside, but she doesn't want to be inside. She's seen the film before. She will.
Maybe she's seen it a few more times.
That's what we think. I think that's right. And it's a really interesting piece. Like I said, we've seen it before. I've seen it with her, and she had the same view. She was out in another room watching it, but she didn't want to be here and interrupted in what she had to say. And this is a film about her life, about growing up a mixture of both African American and Jewish heritage, and how she balanced that, and how she had to deal with that in terms of what race meant. Very much like another student of mine, President Barack Obama. His father was from Kenya, his mother was from Kansas, and the whole issue of how you assess race and how that plays a big role. So I think you'll see this film and have a good sense about what Lacey went through and the conversation she had. Very powerful conversation with people that she knew, including the person who gave her birth, her father and her mother, the people who adopted her, people who were around her, and it's a very touching clip that you'll get the chance to see, and she'll be here to talk. Professor Guinea, as you know, Harvard, like so many other institutions, but in a sense Harvard alone was the last to finally bring women to the law school to teach. And that didn't happen until very recently. It was an all-male school, and one of the first people came who opened up doors in a significant way was Professor Guinea. She's written a ton of books and articles. She's on every possible program you can imagine. She's here, not entirely because of her own request, because I begged her to come, and she did, because she has a lot to say, and she agreed to both moderate a discussion about the film, about the life, about the legacy of Lacey, and what she's able to do, and what this film represents for us. So I hope you'll enjoy the film, and I hope you also will welcome Professor Guinea coming up. Thank you.
So I met Lacey Schwartz a day after the 9/11, when the world turned upside down, inside out. This is when I was teaching at Harvard now for maybe 3 years. I'd been teaching before that at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. And the reason I say this is because I specifically remember Lacey Schwartz walking into the classroom on the day after 9/11. And she was upbeat but serious, even though this was just an enormously powerful and sad and overwhelming event that is what happened in 9/11. And And there was something about Lacey's smile and something about her energy that I picked up immediately, learned over time. She was in a seminar with me that was so successful we decided we'd continue the seminar for the spring as well. And it was during that period that I learned that she was really interested in making movies. But I didn't realize that she was seriously interested in making movies. And so I've had the opportunity now to watch this movie several times. You're going to learn a lot from it. And afterwards, there'll be a Q&A, and you'll have a chance to talk to Lacey about not just the film and the making of the film, but about her own life. That's what the film is about. And there are lots of questions that I'm sure you'll have as a result of the substance of this particular film. But it's really, it's really wonderful to have a law student making a really good movie. So I welcome all of you, and I look forward to the film and to talking to you after.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to all of you for coming. Obviously, being here has very special significance for me. You know, people ask me a lot how I became a filmmaker and if I went to film school, and I very much look at my law school education as my film school, which was an amazing experience, and Professor Grenier was a huge part of that for me. When I came here, I had been a studio art minor in college, focusing on photography, and then I went to, when I got to law school, I was thinking a lot about, there's a lot of media narratives about Harvard Law School, and I think when you're preparing to come here, you devour them. And when I came here, I was really struck by what the experience was really like, and I felt like there were so many issues that I cared very strongly about being here as a law student, and that film felt like an incredible way to talk about those issues, a really powerful way to reach people in a very kind of quick, succinct, and powerful way. And so I realized I had this incredible desire to just like buy a camera and start filming things, even though I didn't really know how to do that. And that was when I decided we had to at least do a third year paper to graduate, that I wanted to make a film as my third year paper. And I went to Professor Grenier and got her approval to advise that project, which Jasleen and I, who very coincidentally, I didn't know this, is here today as well. She's now the head of the Critical Race Studies Department at UCLA, and totally coincidentally, the person I made this film with back in 2002 and 2003 is here today for a panel talking about whiteness, ironically. And so Jasleen and I made this film, but in order to know how to make a film, I took an undergraduate class at the Department of Visual and Environmental Studies down at the undergrad, which the law school also approved me for credit for, in order to make this film. And I, at that time, realized I really didn't like reading case law, and I loved making films. And so from that point forward, I really started making films instead of writing papers as much as possible, and made the film under Lonnie's supervision we called it Legally Black, Brown, Yellow, and Red. And it was about kind of marginalized experiences at Harvard Law School. And we had, I think you may have talked about, like a big screening where we premiered it at the end of the school year, and it was really incredible. And that was when I decided that was what I wanted to do. So it's great to be back here as a filmmaker. Yeah. So, you know, I'm very happy to answer any questions and really to have a discussion about the film. But I wanted to first start, I mean, when I was here, as I said, we took a class called, what was it? Critical Race?
Critical Perspectives.
Critical Perspectives. And I remember we did a lot of autobiographical stuff, talking about who we were and how it affected our work. And so I'd love to hear even your thoughts about media in that, you know, film in that perspective, because it was very influential to me. And to me, it's a very powerful medium, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, one of the things that students did in this particular course that Lacey was taking was writing essentially the equivalent of their political autobiography. Mm-hmm. And it was in reading what she was writing and doing it at the same time that she was also taking a course in filmmaking, mm-hmm. led to this convergence where all of a sudden she's basically telling a very intimate story but also a very a profoundly challenging story that I didn't know all the details, but it was clear that one of the things she was really good at was making a movie. So, so I just feel enormously proud of Lacey that she not only made a film, but she made a great film, and that she was willing to be so honest about what had happened, throughout her life. When when I think about Lacey, I think about the first day of class, which was the day after 9/11. And I remember you walking in to the class with a group of students, and we went around the room, or it may not have been that class, but one of the first weeks. And what Lacey wanted to do was make a film. That was, right?
And I remember you talking about a student. You said something about some student. You're like, well, she's a real filmmaker, though. And I was like, I want to be a real filmmaker, too. And I think you actually talked, it's so ironic. I remember you talking about that she had films on PBS or something, and this film aired on PBS last week. So it was like, it's just so, when you're young and kind of scrappy with it.
Talk a little bit about the film that you did make while you were here that you showed.
Yeah, it was incredible in terms of, as I mentioned it before, just being here. We filmed a lot, and some of that footage I was able to pull for this film, to be honest. But to be here, and I don't know how many of you are actually law students or not, but coming into this space where you've done so many other things in your life, and so many people, I think, that come to this institution are very confident, but then you come here, and a lot of people's confidence was kind of broken down by the pedagogical system. And I was very struck by that. In fact, I was a little bit befuddled by it. And so I really wanted to talk to people from all different backgrounds about what was happening in the process of being here, and how was the actual pedagogy influencing them and what they wanted to do, and what they what they dreamed about. So it was a really incredible process of kind of going through what it takes to get out of here, while also really processing what people were going through in a very deep way. And as I think when you're in academic institutions, you can be kind of very insular, and we were very consumed with the experience, right? We were consumed with the issues around us, and these issues were being reflected back in the world. It wasn't not relevant that we were dealing with at the time a lot of issues on race and various things, but we were very much consumed by it. And so it's kind of this interesting, I think, document of what that experience was like and what that period of time was like. It's interesting because I'm not in this world at all anymore, but Jasleen, who I said is at UCLA working around critical race legal theory, uses the film still and talks about it a lot in the way that I am very much now kind of outside of legal institutions. And I actually never practiced law. I went straight into filmmaking and media production. And I wanted to also talk just one, and then I want to open it up for questions, but I wanted to also share, is interesting because one of what I think is a very big themes of this film is the power of conversation. And I was influenced, besides Professor Guinier's class, there was one other class that had a big effect on me, which is I took a negotiations seminar. And we did one section on difficult conversations, and how, and we did this whole role-playing exercise where there was you had to write out a script for a difficult conversation. And there were 3 people involved. One was playing you, one would play the other person you wanted to have the conversation with, and then there was a third person who played the subconscious, and going back and forth between these 2 people's subconscious. And then we would film it, and then they would, the way they orchestrated, they would say okay, stop, now switch places. And it was, the whole point of it was to help you understand how many different perspectives there are to different conversations, right? There's the 2 people who are in the conversation, and then it's kind of what they're actually, how they are actualizing in the conversation, but then also what they're what they're thinking, and how what you're thinking, they're thinking may be different from what they're actually thinking, and all of these different things. And I was really struck by it because at the time I was living in what I consider to be a racial closet, as you saw in the film, and I really, so when were assigned these conversations, I didn't write out the conversation I wanted to have with my father. That was very much weighing on me because I thought it would honestly be a little overwhelming for the classroom dynamic. But I then went to the instructors afterwards and I said, would you actually do like a session with me outside of the normal class and talk about it? And it really made me think about just the power of how important it is to have these difficult conversations and to get past these issues. And that's really always very much stuck with me from doing that classroom exercise. So it was really pretty effective. And the last thing I'll just say is that I also met my producing partner. Well, I met my husband at Harvard Law School. I met my husband at Harvard Law School, and I also met my business partner and producing partner at, she actually was the medical school when I was the law school, and we realized that she ended up coming around to filmmaking through doing a film about her work in the medical field, but looking at a lot of sociological factors, and actually she got a degree in cultural anthropology and using film in an anthropological sense. So it's so always really interesting for me to come back here because so many things came together here. I feel like I became a filmmaker and met my business partner and my husband all here at Harvard Law School. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
You met yourself.
Yeah, well, yeah.
In some ways.
Yeah, I would say I met myself more in New York, but that's a whole other conversation. Yeah.
How did your parents feel when you told them you wanted to do a film on this and share with, I guess, the public?
I guess in answering that question, I'll also ask how they felt when I did it and how they kind of feel now. So with my mom, as she said, she was kind of a little bit anxious, kind of like, what is this? I think at the same time, she probably felt, I mean, my mother, I went to everybody in my family when I decided to make this film and said, I'm going to do this film, and I'd like to ask you to participate in it with me, but it's completely optional. You know, I'm going to do it with or without you, but it's up to you. And everybody agreed to be involved in it. But my mom, I think she was apprehensive, but at the same time probably felt the most obligated to participate. I mean, even though I think a lot of people having seen the film say, you know, some people, even in her situation, she wouldn't have done it. You know, they wouldn't have, so I do still give her credit for participating. And now that it's out, she really loves it. I mean, I think she's proud of me as a filmmaker, but she also feels twofold about it. One, it strengthened our relationship. It kind of got past a lot of any of the issues that we were holding on to, and it also helped her as an individual. Obviously, for a long time, she had a real issue with, you know, not owning up to the truth, and I think this has really helped her live a more honest life. And with my dad, yeah, I think it seems pretty obvious. He probably wouldn't have opted to do what I did, but he, once again, did participate as well. And I think that he still remains the most private, the most kind of reluctant to talk about these issues, but he did it with me. And I don't know if he thought so much about what was going to happen with it. I don't know if he still thinks so much about what's happening with it. He has still opted to remain fairly private around it. And a big part of my learning experience with this film was that I have to accept him for where he is in the same way I want him to accept me for where I am. And so, you know, he did this with me, and now I respect his kind of privacy around it. And but he's handled it pretty well, and I think we're in a good place because a lot of that anxiety and a lot of the air that the kind of stress we had between us has really dissipated. Yeah.
Well, one little question and a larger one. The little one is how long was it from the beginning of your filming to the end? And the second larger question, I guess, is what do you hope people who see it take from it?
So really, it took me 8 years to make, from 2006 to 2008. But really, if I'm expanding beyond that, I started thinking about it when I was here, and I graduated in 2003. But you know, at the time, I was really thinking, actually, I started off making a broader project around what it was to be Black and Jewish, and it was going to be a broader film, not as personal as it is now. And then I got to this point where I realized, because for me, it was all about this idea of dual identity, and in a second, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well, that like, I was really struggling to internally integrate my own identities of being both Black and Jewish, and for me, I'd grown up with being Jewish was synonymous with being white. And so I was trying to expand my own mind of what it meant to be Jewish, and how I was going to really internally integrate. And I was interested in how other people were doing that as well. So while I was here down at Widener, I did a lot of research. I mean, I kind of forget, but this was really pre-internet. in any sort of massive way. So I was doing a lot of book research on Jewish diversity and stuff like that. So I wasn't working on a film yet, but I was really thinking about it when I was here. And then when I got out of school, I thought I started researching more and more, but I didn't really start working on it until 2006. And then we developed it for 2 years, shot it for 3 years, and edited it for 3 years. Not doing it every day, but over the course of that time. And for me, going back to what I said, it was an initial project I wanted to do. I felt that I realized how much my own family secrets were controlling me. And then when I started really thinking about that, going outside of this idea of kind of Jewish diversity, that this was affecting so many other people as well. And so before I could kind of step forward and kind of preach, oh, we should do this, or oh, we should do this, or this is how we should, approach issues of diversity, or whatever it is, integration, that I had to do the work first. That I couldn't talk about things in a larger way before I could really live that in my own life, that I could really uncover these family secrets, that I could live an open life. Like I couldn't preach about something that I wasn't experiencing in my own life. So I feel like what the film serves as is it's me modeling the process of how do you have these conversations, how do you move forward in an honest and open way, but with still kind of respect for the other people around you, move past being a victim in your own life. And because so many people, and it kind of relates to what this is that we're asking other people to also giving them a space to share their little white lies as well, because I think too many people live with these family secrets over their heads, not able to move forward. And I really feel like that the film can be a tool to help other people have these conversations in their lives. And we're building all sorts of educational tools and discussion tools that can be used around it. So we have stuff set up online on our website and a place where you can share your little white lie. I also have a table outside if you walk outside where you can share your little white lie on the spot. And it's really a space where you can see all the different incredible stories that people are sharing. But it's really about the fact that it's unfortunate to me that people are being held back by these things. And I'll say one last thing in answer to that is what I really want. I really believe in the power of conversation, and that's why I was thinking you have a project, like your Race Talks project, which we looked at a lot when we were developing the film, is that I think so often we are not talking about in our society about issues that are really important, such as race, obviously being a big one, not the only one. And that it's very hard to expect society on a larger level to talk about issues such as race if we don't even have families talking about it. Because I look at it as like families are the building blocks of society. And so we have to really look at what is going on within our families and how is that reverberating out to the rest of society. So I really want kind of my story to be a way to get people talking. It's not that I want them to come away with any one point of view. It's that I want them to come away with the conversation.
But one of the things about Lacey that I think is important for the people in the audience to understand is that she was willing to tackle these issues when she was in law school, which is a time when you're least likely to talk about these kinds of things because it's so competitive inside of law school. So one of the things that you did that I think would be interesting for the audience is the film that you made while you were here that you showed at the end of the semester, and what prompted you to make the film and then to develop it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was definitely, when I think of myself back in law school, as I talked about before, I was kind of like a little bit of a rebel rouser. Like I was just really willing to push the conversation. I just didn't get it totally. I didn't get the competitiveness of the environment. I didn't get why it was people were having really negative experiences. I mean, you read these books like 1L and stuff like that, and they just talk about this really intimidating experience, and people were still experiencing that in different ways. And I really wanted to push that conversation to the forefront in ways that I'm sure was kind of annoying to like the dean and certain professors at the time, but I kind of didn't care. I was just. And I was charged in a way maybe I'm not as charged anymore, pushing people's buttons. And now I just want the conversations to be had. That's the biggest thing.
No, but you interviewed people at the law school.
Yeah, I interviewed professors, students of all different backgrounds. I mean, there was all sorts of things. Like, there was like this one kid, this Asian kid, I don't remember his background, who he was super young, like 19 years old or something. I don't remember.
From
if you
Hawaii.
Yeah, he was like super, super young. He was like a 19-year-old kid at law school. And he was clearly, one of these Doogie Howser-esque, like, and he, in one of his outlines that he published on a public forum, used, instead of writing like a black person, he used like the N-word. And it was a whole thing. Like, he was, and in certain ways, obviously he was trying to be antagonistic, but it was kind of, and there were all of these different people that were involved in the scenario around him posting and why people were like freely using certain language and being discriminatory and all these different things. So like I interviewed him, we interviewed, other people relating to it to really try to get in at what were the conversations that were and weren't being had at campus.
And then when you showed the film, you had a huge audience.
Yeah, there was a lot of people that came. And that was right when Dean Kagan had just come in. I think we like to think we were partially responsible. I mean, we were just really, pushing the conversation. This was when all this stuff was going on with Cornel West. I don't know if you remember. I don't even remember exactly what the issues were at the time. To be honest with you, it was just like a lot of stuff about people feeling what was the representation in the documents we were reading and all of that stuff. And so we had a big screening. We were pushing the conversation, and I think it was pretty effective. And it's interesting to see, as I said, like Jesleen continuing that conversation in the space where she is now.
There were a lot of others here at Harvard Law School who you felt were also pushing various conversations about pedagogy and competitiveness and grades.
Yeah, some yes and some no. There's this, and again, seriously, like, I don't do this stuff that much, but just the whole idea of this like reasonable man standard, which is very, very much a part of legal pedagogy, which is like, what would the reasonable man think about? So obviously there's a gendered bias to that, but like, who is the reasonable man? And I think that was something, and it definitely connects to my film, is like, what is normative, right, in our lives? Like, what's considered neutral? What is considered the position, which is the default position to which we go to? Like, I grew up in a space that was very much lacking racial consciousness, right? It wasn't that it was, people ask me all the time, like, I grew up in a space where it was, where I experienced discrimination, or other people were being, I experienced racism, or I heard people saying things, and I didn't. It was almost like this lack of this awareness of other, right? This experience of being invisible. And I think here at the law school, like that was when I was here, it felt like it was being rewarded, right? This idea of kind of like really whitewashing a situation. And so when you call it, it's the kind of, there's a black man, there's a man, right? Like this idea of who is that reasonable man? And, and how does our legal system work for all different kinds of situations was a big conversation. I don't feel like it wasn't at the forefront of the teachings, and it wasn't mainstream in any way. So there were some of us who were pushing it, with Professor Guinier being, yeah, thank you.
Well, she was so energetic. I can remember when you walked into class. This was the day after 9/11. That was our first day of class.
Yeah.
I still remember to this moment you walking into class, which is odd, right? Since there are lots of students who walk into class, but there was something very lively about you and daring.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jeannie. We were contemporaries in law school, and I love this film, and I just wanted to ask you to talk about the process of making the film, the nuts and bolts, and the challenges. What were the hardest things about making this film, and were there moments where you wanted to just throw in the towel and give up, and what were the roadblocks that you really had to get around? And then second, what would have been the most surprising reactions that you've gotten to the film? Have people had reactions or interpretations that you hadn't intended or thought about that came out of their experience watching it?
Yeah. So in terms of the making of the film, so there's two pieces of it, right? There's the actual kind of professional, like making an independent film, and then there is the personal piece of it. And I think that So on both sides of it, there's moments. I think in the beginning, on the personal side of it, in the beginning, actually just really making the film, having getting the courage to have the conversations, not even the actual conversation, but the conversation to make the film, and then actually getting through all the conversations. It was just exhausting, when you're doing it also through. It was just very, very tiring, and there were moments where in the beginning, it was figuring out why I was really doing the film and getting through that process of asking myself whose story is it to tell. Why am I telling this story? And all of those constant questions in my head. So it's really pushing myself to move forward. And obviously on the professional side, fundraising is a huge thing. And how do you get the money to make a project like this? And I did that mainly through grants. The first half I raised through grants and donations. The second half we got funding through PBS that came out. It's through an organization called Independent Television Service, ITVS. They come on as our producing partner about halfway through. Actually, halfway through the edit, so like 2/3 of the way through the film. And so that was definitely, just, making independent films like running a small business, and you have to support yourself at the same time. And, I went to Harvard Law School and I worked on a film for 8 years, so it's kind of living off of potential, as opposed to
Well, you also have a husband who is making some money.
Only recently, though. I only got him recently. So,
but he's somebody who also went to Harvard Law School.
Yeah. So, but we weren't together until really almost the film was done, and the funding was certainly in. And so I think that, so that was definitely fundraising is almost like the cliche, but it's super, it's just so many pieces to it. But I think when those two things came together, and what I would say was the hardest moment was when I had finished the shooting of the film. I thought, oh, it's there, it's in the can, literally handed this 300 hours of footage over to the editor. I was like, here, cut a film, and her coming back to me and saying, I need more. And people watching rough cuts and saying we don't know, meaning she needed to understand what I had experienced. And I'm thinking, wow, I just went through this process, I put it all on film. And it was the same thing in screenings where I really had to write, and I had to find a way to work with her to access my inner thoughts. And a lot of that comes out through the writing, which is hopefully ideally more subtle than it may seem, but there's a lot of writing in the film, and through the narration and other ways that we were able to kind of construct the story, because people were initially watching it and thinking, what did you experience? And I'm thinking, wow, I just opened myself up completely and totally. How can you not get it? And people still saying, we don't get it, we don't understand. So it took many months of working within a team, of going back and forth and writing and doing screenings and coming back and writing a lot and then pulling back the writing. And so that process was really, was very intense. And probably that was what really pushed me, because I thought, I raised money, I shot the footage, and people still don't get what I went through. And so that was tough. But in the end, super rewarding, and it definitely helped me learn even more so about what it takes to construct a narrative and to tell a story. And then the other question was, surprising reactions. If anything, I think the most surprising reaction is that the reactions I wouldn't say they're uniform for every person, but it's not as broken up by groups as I thought, right? I do a lot of different kinds of screenings, this is even a more mixed screening than most. We do Jewish film festivals, and we do Black film festivals, and we go into, I went to Columbia the other day, but we did, the Hillel brought us in, so it was all Jewish students. Or we'll do we do Georgetown next week, the Black Student Alliances, so it'll be kind of these segregated screenings, but actually the reactions aren't as different as I thought they would be. And that was surprising to me, because I think in the end people connect very much to this idea of family secrets, and that cuts across groups, that cuts across experiences. And granted, people have different reactions to the racialized piece of it, but it was, for instance, I thought only Jews would ask me how am I raising my kids, but all sorts of people ask me that, and that's surprising to me.
And how old are your children?
I have 1.5-year-old twins, identical twin boys. Identical boys, yeah.
Did you have an ultimate intended audience in mind when you made it?
You have to have one to pitch it, to be honest. And we always said, it was kind of my core audience is Jewish audiences, Black audiences, and mixed race audiences, very much target. But then in the end, we feel we are really cutting across audiences. we're cut and across age demographics.
I see a part of this PBS last week.
Yeah, so we aired on an Independent Lens series on March 23rd.
Was the whole thing?
It's 53 minutes. So this is 66 minutes, that was 53 minutes.
What's next on the horizon? This is a great.
Oh, thank you. So Miranda and I did another film that came out in 2014, and we're actually going to hit theaters with it in the fall of 2015. It's called Defret. It's an Ethiopian film, a fiction film. It's a fiction film, but it's based on a true story. It's about female abduction and forced marriage. And so what we've been doing with this film and that film is doing a lot of touring and doing a pretty big outreach and impact campaigns where we pretty much do films to, as I said, stir conversations and get people talking about issues that we care about. And with that one, we're really working around issues of child marriage. So that is going to be coming out. So there's a lot of work around that. There's a lot of work around this. We have another project that we are producing. We're working with a great director named Yoruba Richin to do a film based on a book. We optioned a book called How It Feels to Be Free about Black female performers during the civil rights movement and how they were activists both on and off the stage and screen. So we're hoping to turn that into like a 4-part series. And then Miranda and I are going to be writing and directing fiction together.
Are you actually going to be talking with Black females from the
Yes, so the 4 women we're focusing on are Diane Carroll, Lena Horne, Cicely Tyson, and Nina Simone, and kind of using that, that's the book focuses on 6 women, but those are the 4 that we want to focus on, and kind of what they each represented during those different times and how kind of they built off of each other. We really also want to make it not just a historical piece, but also focus on what's happening now with Black women performers and what is the image of Black women that's put forward, and how also all these women kind of built upon each other and from what Lena Horne started, then came Diane Carroll, et cetera. Nina Simone and Diane Carroll, and then Cicely Tyson and building together. Yeah, thank you.
Something you said, secrets make patterns, and then also talk about categories of Black.
So what about the secrets?
You went to see a therapist who specialized in secrets. I thought that was
Yeah.
right away. It's not what therapists are about, but you just said secrets make patterns. I think that's.
She said that. The therapist said that.
The therapist said that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, forget that part.
Okay.
But, categories of Black.
Uh-huh.
Just,
Yeah, I mean, I look at identity as very, very subjective. And granted, identity is made up of an internal and an external piece, and how you internalize the external. And you could have an identity that something that a way you identify as being, and somebody else can identify you as something else, and that can obviously then affect how you see yourself. But and so I always preface by saying, for me, I do identify as being biracial, and for me, I identify that as a category of being Black. I know that not everybody feels that way. Other people who are biracial, they may not, biracial, having a Black and white parent, may not identify as being Black. They may identify as being biracial, being its own category. And I had a conversation with Professor Ogletree earlier about Barack Obama and how he identifies and how people feel about how he identifies. And I do feel like I connect to how he identifies because I see there's similarities in our experience and how we grew up, and he was raised in a white family. And I think he's written extensively about how, in a sense, he decided to be Black. I think for me, a lot of it connects to like the consciousness of being a person of color, being raised in a situation where that racial consciousness did not exist, and then coming into that consciousness and feeling so acutely aware of it influences me a lot. So I identify as a person of color, and I feel like I carry that consciousness with me. And so I do identify with being Black and being part of a community and seeing things through that, and how people see me as well. I mean, I was influenced by that.
What about with your children?
So with my children, I'm married to a man who is African American. He grew up in a Black church, although he's not religious. He grew up with a very strong sense of what it was to be Black and part of a Black community, and I think he brings that to our kids. And I think.
And you have children who are,
yeah.
what, two
Yeah,
now?
yeah. They're in a year and a half.
Twins.
So like, I think that with my kids, they're men also. And I think that we're still very much in a place where what it is to be a black man in America is very real, and you have to raise them with consciousness and awareness. I mean, there was, I always am a pretty big fan of Charles Blow, the New York Times columnist, but he's written a few things recently that really resonated with me. And I think when his son recently was stopped by cops on the Yale campus, and he talked about just the idea of like being both so angry and so thankful that he taught his son what to do in an experience when you're stopped by. He was stopped by a policeman at gunpoint, and how thankful he was
On
that
campus.
he had taught his kid, how to deal with that kind of situation. So I think with my kids, I'm very conscious of that, and it's interesting because so in terms of like the categories of being black, I always think it's really interesting when you look at families where you can have a white parent and a black parent, they have multiple kids, and those kids identify differently within the same family. And I think that's really so much that proof of how those identities are so subjective. But at the same time, I think it's really important for parents to raise their kids both to feel really supported and really confident, but at the same time very aware of the world they live in, because I've also heard a lot of stories of people who were raised in situations where they were raised with almost so much optimism, and they went out in the world and it was very like they had negative experiences, and it really kind of affected them, and they were ill prepared for that in a sense. Like in general, I believe you shouldn't have to shelter your kids from stuff that kids can handle a lot more than you give them people sometimes give them credit for. Yeah.
I don't know if you're involved now in the Jewish community, and I specifically say the community, not just how you identify. Because I think the Jewish community also carries the little white lies within our own community of saying, as you reference in your film, growing up in your family, Jews are white, Jews are this way, Jews eat bagels, which Sephardic Jews, for instance, don't do. And there's a tension, I know, for people of color who are Jewish, being in the community and being seen as the other, even though they're as Jewish as anybody else. And actually the white person next to them could not have had a Jewish childhood, but be a Jew by choice. But because they're white, they're assumed to be Jewish. And then you, who are brought up in a Jewish family, can be assumed to be other. And that's a very difficult, that people have told me, and I have heard, and I believe that that's a very difficult issue that my community as a Jew has to deal with. And I was wondering what your experiences were and what your thoughts were about involving your kids.
Mm-hmm. So I do a lot of work in the Jewish community. I work in particular with an organization called B'chol Lashon, which means, you're familiar with it, that works on racial, ethnic, and cultural diversity in the Jewish community. Their website is globaljews.org, and I've worked with them for a long time. They executive produced the film, and they're very involved with the outreach. And we do, everything you're talking about is what we work on a daily basis. And so we're doing a large campaign around this film to use it within the Jewish community and have those conversations, and really, again, going back to like what is normative within the Jewish community. And also, like, can you walk into a space, any Jewish space, and not have to leave a piece of yourself behind?
Explain yourself. Even if you
right.
bring all yourself in, that given how the Jewish community acts, have a test to do that I don't have to do when I walk in.
Right. So we do a lot of work with that, and really trying to, and one of the reasons I came to the organization is because they've done a lot of work around media, and they really embrace media, and so they were very supportive of this project. They came on as supporters first, and then I started consulting with them after the fact. And so I'm still very much closely working with them. And so, I feel very strongly in terms of my own personal, that's almost like the worky part of it. And I do believe, though, part of my personal connection is trying to make that change within the community, and I feel strongly about it. And we're figuring it out, within our own family. I think like many people with young kids, you're figuring out what does that look like, and how do you bring that in, married to somebody who's not Jewish? What does that look like? I do plan on raising my kids within the Jewish community, but I'm not sure what it looks like. I actually just moved to Montclair, New Jersey, and I don't know if you remember, but like when I was here, in Lonnie's class, there was a couple of people who had grown up in Montclair, and I remember us talking about it in there. I think we even read an article or a case study or something about Montclair. It was one of the most diverse places, kind of per capita, that in the country. And I had always remembered that, and they have actually a big filmmakers community, so it's one of the reasons that I just moved there. So, and now I just did a screening of this film at one of their schools as part of a film festival screening, and afterwards, there's been a lot of people. There's like 3 synagogues, and everybody's like, everybody wants you to go to their synagogue, because it's like, obviously I'm out there and talking about this film, so we'll see what happens. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
Yes, you hit on a couple of really good issues. One is just regarding, race and identity, because I'm part Lebanese, I'm Irish, German, Scottish. And my mother is Lebanese. My grandfather was born outside of Beirut, Lebanon in 1901 and immigrated to the United States in 1903 was there. All of my identities, Irish, German, Scottish, Lebanese, were all never practiced in my family. We didn't identify with any of them, didn't have any traditions with any of them. And if you were to have me stand next to my sister and to my father, you wouldn't even think we were even related, because we don't look any bit alike.
Yeah.
So I always found that kind of interesting. And the other thing is that regarding your identity when you fill out tax returns or census or anything else, you have to check off the box. And I always checked off Caucasian because I was told to always check it off. But I didn't know what Lebanese was. It wasn't in any of the identifiable groups, Hispanic or American Indian or whatever. So I had always thought of maybe putting this other or, questioning it, but I never did. And it wasn't until maybe 5 years ago that I was reading the tax returns of the census that actually stated that people who are of Middle Eastern descent are actually Caucasian. And I'm like, oh, so I've been putting the right thing all this time.
That's funny. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. Yeah.
I really love the movie, and thank you so much for sharing so much of this. And I find that there's a lot of people that have very complex backgrounds too, and it's coming out more and more. It's more acceptable to be multiracial, multicultural. I myself was also raised multicultural and multiracial, and my husband is African American, so we had to, whenever we travel, deal with people who don't necessarily have been exposed to such things. What I wanted to ask you about is in your filming this movie, you have so much footage. Did you actually have someone coming around with you with a camera? And did it turn out that you found a lot of your family members had movies from when you were young? So how did you put that all together?
Yeah, I mean, I was really lucky in a sense. So the footage kind of comes from 4 places primarily. One, I had an uncle who was very much kind of an amateur filmmaker, and he was shooting, even when I was a baby, he was shooting like 16mm footage and stuff like that. So I have a bunch of that stuff. And even actually then we even had some stuff that my father had of his family and the same uncle had of his family. So we had even from my parents growing up a little bit. Then I was born kind of right at the right time that we had a home video camera around the age I was 10. So that kind of covered 10 through whatever. And then I got into filmmaking. And so I was filming through my kind of university and law school days. And so I had that chunk of footage. And then I guess there's one other chunk of, and then I brought in a camera person who filmed with me for 3 years. And we were able to kind of bring that stuff all together fairly seamlessly. And then there's one other section that's not as big, but is found footage. So I was even, like my biological father, that stuff of him from back in the day from that news program, that's kind of like the found footage and that we were able to also incorporate. And even so I went back to my high school and went through their video archives and found not only some B-roll from my high school days, but literally of me like sitting in a classroom from those days. So it was like I was really able to take all this stuff, and it's amazing how much, that 20 seconds can be like really golden when you're doing this kind of film. I wanted to tell you, we have to kind of wrap it up, and I'm happy to answer any last questions, but then I actually am catching a plane back to New York tonight. But I wanted to just share what's going on with the film from here on out, and please spread the word. So everything with the film, first of all, is connected and up on our website at littlewhitelieTheFilm.com. And from there, you can go on, as I said, click into their stories. You can like us on Facebook, which is at facebook.com/littlewhitelieTheFilm. It's a big part of how we continue the conversation and keep people updated. We also are building discussion tools around it, both in educational settings and also in conversation kits and giving people a way to form conversation clubs where they can have these conversations, and we're building the toolkits around that. And so we just aired on PBS. We are now up on iTunes and Amazon, so that's where people can see the film. And also on our website, we have a full list of where we're doing screenings. We have lots of screenings all over the place. So thank you again, and please stay in touch. Yes. Thank you, and thank you to Professor Grenier and Ogletree. And I feel bad, I didn't thank the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for bringing me here and organizing this. Thank you so much.